Most of the people whom I know, but Jim Ahmedabad wanted to make it.
Madhuri, I can't hear you. Your internet connection
And a
might
half
be
at that
slow.
time, and I'd taken a break. And I wrote my first story for my daughter, and then one led to another. And then I decided at that point that writing is what I want to do, children's stories in particular. I've done a range of writing, nonfiction, fiction, business fiction. I tried my hand at copywriting and advertising, and I realized there are some areas of writing that are not for me. I prefer longhand writing rather than the ideating and creating copy that so there are some, but yes, long form, non-fiction and fiction is what I've settled myself into.
What kind of writing you enjoy more?
Mhm. There's a time, there was a time when I would have said fiction, but in both the writings are equally interesting and fulfilling. There's a certain element of fiction that it's very attractive, and I'm still learning the process, I should say that. Non-fiction, when you get into the creative non-fiction kind of thing, it becomes very, very interesting. If you're just doing an article, that's one type of writing and it is for a certain audience. But if you take a little more leeway, essentially I'm talking about taking an idea, taking certain characters, a certain reality and a situation, and working around that. That gives you a lot of flexibility to look at different angles and try to get that feel, not just the message, just the whole feeling to the audience. That
Madhuri, we lost you to the audience that, and then we lost what you said.
okay, I said that. Is it clear now?
Yeah, better. These are the
Yeah, I
technical
put it on my
challenges that we have.
technical challenges of working in the COVID time. The broadband goes a little low, so I put myself on the phone. So to answer your question again, yeah, I enjoy both fiction and non-fiction. Not so much the straightforward nonfiction where you're driving a point across. Um, that is interesting if you're interested in the subject, and there are certain times when the subject is extremely interesting, and I like doing that. But in general, when you move even nonfiction towards situation, the character, people, the word across to the reader in the way that we normally take inputs in the real world. We don't take one line inputs, we don't take a thought and say this is the way we want to, this is what I'm comfortable with. When you're in the real world, you're listening to people, you're constantly observing and processing it in your mind, probably subconsciously. So, and that's the way you process information around you. So creative nonfiction gives you that leeway to kind of replicate in the writing form how that's very interesting too. So both fiction and non-fiction, both are interesting to me. Is the
It's like
sound
asking the
quality good?
question. Tasla
Mm.
was like asking the question, which child do you love the most out of the two?
Oh, I'm sure every mother and father has an answer to that, although they will not admit. Yeah, yeah. At this point, I don't have a clear insight into whether I like pure fiction more or creative nonfiction more. I don't have that insight, but maybe one day I'll have that insight.
So, from a successful corporate executive to now a successful writer, what have been some of the highlights?
Um, I'll ignore the successful part of it.
Okay,
Success
so
is
from a
relative.
corporate executive to a writer,
Yeah. From a
what
corporate
have been some of the
executive to
highlights?
writer.
Yes.
See, individual highlights would be there for everybody, and I'll get to that. Have I moved into it, which I partially answered. Now, the point is, when I became a corporate executive, it was a dream. It's a dream that you grew up with because it's been your parents' dream or your father's dream in my case. And then you go to your management degree, and that dream gets bigger, and you haven't really tested it. You don't really know whether that is the dream for you. And that dream was key to work in the corporate world or start something of your own and make it big. All of us, most of us, had that dream, with a few exceptions, few exceptionally clear people, but this was the dream. On hindsight, now I realize that that dream is an external one, of wanting to make it in the corporate world. It doesn't matter what domain it is. It doesn't, all those other things don't matter, but it's this external dream that I had at that point in time. And I learned over, it took me a long time just getting out of that dream. And now I realize that that was an external dream for me, with nothing internal binding it or holding it together. It's only when I started writing that I realized that there is something in this universe that draws you to the thing that you're supposed to do. That's the only way I can explain it. Which is why when I wrote the first story, and the first story that I wrote was just a children's story for my daughter, who was just a 2-year-old at that time. I made bullet points, like, to use the phrase a corporate executive does. I did bullet points and then made a story out of it. And I do have a colleague who still does that, so I can fully understand how that happens. Having written that first story partly from management corporate process of writing to converting it into a story, I realized that once you write that, another story idea emerged, and another, and that's how it became a 15 or 20 story series, Priya and Porky. So when it is something, there's something that you're meant to do, and you get a handle on it, it's that internal deep down thing that draws you to it, and that's the internal one that's binding and fulfilling. So I'm grateful that I've had the chance early on in life, in my mid to late 20s, of having figured that internal thing. Now, after that, what happens is a long process. You still have that external dream that is holding you, and you want to like do this great children's fiction and everything, and then you realize it doesn't always work that way. Each person has her own path, and that's the path I'm following. So learning more and more how to be a better writer, and seeing what I can give to others who want to become a better writer, and to learn from my mistakes, probably. There's a lot more to it.
So, for somebody to become a writer, should one go to a writing school, or does one just start? I know you just started it, but for somebody else to get into some writing school, get trained to write.
Can you repeat that question? I think I lost you for a moment.
Yeah, I said
Hmm.
if somebody wants to become a writer, is does somebody need to go to a writing school to learn how to write, or you just jump in and start like the way you did it?
Writing has there's no good answer to that. My experience has been writing by myself and learning that way. Certainly, a good teacher can help. The question is whether a writing program helps you. For you to get into a writing program, you can make it obviously when you have a certain capability, but there are different levels of learning. If you haven't learned the basic level, then the program may not do as much for you as it could if you were at a certain level. For example, recently I started taking masterclass, and there are a whole lot of very good authors and author come teachers on masterclass, and they are extremely good. And I know for a fact that today I'm able to leverage some of that learning and convert it into a learning for myself. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So, yes, writing programs do help, but you should be at a place where you're able to take that help in. For example, most MBA colleges, where the very good ones, they have a whole lot of very good they ask for at least a 2 to 3 year work experience postgraduate program. Can you hear me?
Yeah, in between we lost
Robin?
you. Yeah, I heard you. In between we just lost a few words.
Yeah. So when you go to a MBA program, they ask you to have 2 to 3 years of experience and then come. And that's been the trend for the last 10 to 15 years. There's a reason for that, that unless you have experienced that a certain duration of corporate work or in any field, you will not be able to take in as much of the learning as you could. And that principle applies even to writing. Yes, you have to start writing whenever you realized it, whenever the interest caught you. But over a period of time, your learning is much faster if you go to a program, because writing by itself, if you want to be a little game of chance kind of thing, you may or may not make it. You still need a full-time job, and you do have to repay the tuition fee, or you are investing that amount of money. So that's another factor you need to take into consideration before you go for a program.
There are many writers who are fiction writers and then they cross over to non-fiction. How does one do that?
Actually, I thought the question should be the other way around.
Okay, from non-fiction
Because,
to fiction.
yeah, because
Okay,
most of us do non-fiction. In schools, we have essays that we write. In colleges, we
that's
write our speeches, and we do write symposiums and project work, and we are more used to doing non-fiction. Maybe not exactly using all the principles of creative nonfiction, which doesn't meet academic or corporate bounds, but certainly we all write nonfiction. Uh, the more difficult thing is to get into move from nonfiction to creative nonfiction, which is a more realistic kind of nonfiction, or to move from nonfiction completely to fiction. The other way around is the more difficult thing. Like, for example, essentially what I was saying when I talk about the bulleted points is I needed a frame for the story. It doesn't need bulleted points, but I needed the frame of the plot. I noted those things down, and once I had that, I could write the story. So you can use different techniques to write the first story or the second story. I had once attended a workshop where a group of teachers from Rajkot had come. British Library was one actor, he was another author from Pune, and he gave us some cues, and we had to add in, pick up those cues ourselves and then build it into a story. I mean, stories that you could tell your child in the night or in the classroom, and they were good. One teacher could not make herself write fiction. She said, it's just not happening for me. And that's perfectly valid too. What I'm saying is, out of that class of 30 or 40 people, everyone, with the exception of one teacher, was able to write stories. So it's not as hard as we think. It's just that having written that first story, for us to move forward into a space where we become a very experienced good writer is a matter of mastering the technique also. So that is the long process behind writing.
Madhuri, let's try one thing. I think your bandwidth is very, very low. So
Let
let's
me
try
go
you
back to
going
the,
off. No, let's try
yeah,
going off video for you because we want
yeah,
to at
I'll
least
do that.
hear what you're saying. Because video is taking a lot of bandwidth. Okay?
With that, yeah,
Yeah. So you can see us, but we can't see you. When
I
your
like that.
bandwidth is better, then you can always come back on video. Or if you're changing something, then you can always come back on video.
I
Uh,
like that equation.
so we talk about creative writing. Where is creative writing more, in fiction or non-fiction?
Clearly in fiction, because in nonfiction, obviously um, it is possible to write nonfiction without the creative elements. And in certain areas, creative nonfiction, you just can't do it. Like you're doing a paper for the corporate, in a company or in academia. Obviously, you can't do creative nonfiction, creative inputs into nonfiction. It clearly, very clearly has to be pure nonfiction. So what was your question again?
I said, where is creative writing more, in fiction or non-fiction?
Can you define that question a little more? Do you mean the elements of
Yes,
creativity
yes,
where you
creativity.
conjure things?
That's right, elements of creativity. Because if it's non-fiction, I guess one picks up the facts or what one has observed. Whereas non-fiction is, fiction is going to be completely what one imagines. My understanding. I may be wrong.
There's two ways to answer that. The first is that yes, if we take the how we define creativity itself, if we are defining creativity as creating characters out of the blue, a situation out of the blue, and seeing where it goes, yeah, obviously, fiction does have that. Fiction is based on that element mostly, except when you're just replicating characters that you've seen. But the thing is, even in fiction, when we write, we are taking elements of our experience, elements of bits and pieces of people, situations, thoughts, words, actions that we have seen. And I believe that's how even fiction emerges from us. Now, if we define it by that level of conjuring something that didn't exist before, if we take it by that definition, obviously there's a whole lot of it in fiction. But if we change our definition, and I've seen a lot of mm, domain experts do it, when you bring up a new thought, which is probably an observation of how things happen or a learning in their experience, and you bring it out in nonfiction, any such new thought, observation, experience is also creativity. It existed. It's just that we are more tuned to thinking that creating a character and a situation is creativity. It isn't limited to that. So if we take this broader definition of any observation that we are able to bring up anew and put it across, and that is creativity, then yes, nonfiction too does have those elements. Essentially, I'm saying that the line between intellectual thinking and observation and experiment, and the line that it has that we've cleanly demarcated, separated from creativity, it blurs. As you know, there's nothing in this world that we create out of nothing. It always comes out of something. So when we look at that as the definition of creativity, then creativity exists in both fiction and in nonfiction. It's just that the way we present it is different. That's all is the difference, in my opinion. So it is there in both.
So it's always in reference to something.
Always. I think all writing is with reference to something. All our thoughts, acts, and beliefs are with reference to something, whether we recognize it or not.
So one of the things that I was reading somewhere, it says if you want to be a good writer, you have to engage the empathy of the reader and use personal candor to draw the reader in.
Robin,
So what does that mean? Can you hear me?
now I can.
Okay, so the question I was asking is, I was reading somewhere that if you want to be a good writer, you should be able to engage the empathy of the reader and use personal candor to draw the reader in. Now, how does one do that?
Yeah, drawing the reader in.
Yeah, so it's an engage the empathy of the reader and use personal candor.
Hmm. Um, See, our world is made up of the outer things, right? The most observable things are the words and actions that people have. A lot of writing is based on those observable actions and facts as we see them. Now, if we write at that level, there is a certain element of interest and there is a certain amount of presentation and writing that happens. But what is more important is the layer beneath it, the inner world. Now, the basic rule with fiction is that the surface elements are fine, this is the plot, this is what happens, the hero or the heroine go do this, they struggle, and then they achieve it or they don't achieve it, and that's the surface level thing that happens. But each act that they do, each struggle that they respond to is based on an inner world of their own. It's the person that they are, a huge set of things that makes up that person. And if you put that person in a different situation, obviously the person will respond differently. So when you take that inner world into consideration, it becomes a lot more interesting to readers, because it's no longer a surface level action of a superhuman person or a hero heroine coming and doing something, but we always relate to the inner world of another person. We may like it, we may not like it, it may put us off, but that's a different thing. Then we are talking of the audiences, and that differs. So I'll not get into who's your audience and who's not, but essentially when you can bring in that inner world and what is likely to happen and what happened because this is the reason, that's when you bring the reader into the subject, into the writing matter, and the reader gets interested in it. Now, you talked of empathy and how do you get the reader to relate to it. Now, the point is, I can only, to give a good example, I'll talk of the divorce book that I've written, Untying the Fine Knots. Now, the point is, there's a lot of pain when you go through a hardship like that. But pain always has two elements. One element that is always there, that is the hurt, the immense hurt that you have been through. The second element is anger, which does not necessarily need to be there. But a lot of time we don't make a clear distinction of our hurt slipping into anger. So when this whole cloud of pain exists within you with both the hurt and the anger and the resultant resentment, you end up writing from that anger and resentment, because that is hugely, that has the capacity to overpower you. So when you write from that anger or resentment against a person or a set of people or a generic set of circumstances, the world is against me or this person did this to me kind of anger, it's very hard for people to empathize with the writing. It's, you look at yourself when you talk to people around you, family and friends. When we rave and rant, when we speak with a lot of anger, it is so difficult for people to be in our presence and continue the conversation. So the way to draw the reader in with empathy is to hold on to that hurt, not slip into the anger, but write with that pain and hurt and understanding. That's when you can draw the reader in. I personally believe that you cannot really draw in people with anger, not in the long term, maybe short term, because there may be some wavelength that is matching at that point in time. But if you do want to make a long lasting piece of writing that is durable and deep in understanding, then you have to deal with the hurt and let go of the anger and write. So that is how you reach out to a user and draw them in.
Out of the three emotions, keep the anger aside, keep the hurt and pain.
Pardon?
So what I hear you say is, keep the anger aside, right from your hurt and pain.
Yeah, that's a process of learning. If you're holding the anger within you and you write it, thinking, I'll keep this anger aside, I'll only write from my hurt, writing doesn't always allow you that leeway. In the process of writing the book, I realized I thought I had let go of a lot of anger and some resentment, but the process of writing showed me that it wasn't so. So I had to do a couple of rounds with the book, in the process identifying the areas where I hadn't let go still. And it was only after I did that that I could see a difference in the writing. Essentially, these activities, writing or music or dance or whatever, comes from a subconscious level after a point, after you get through the initial technique part, that comes from within you. And what comes from within you just comes the way it is. You think that you're coaching, covering it in a certain way, but you really can't. It comes through. So for you to speak with honesty of only the pain and not let the hurt in, ideally you should let go of the anger before you can write. or use the writing process as a way to identify the areas where you're still angry and letting go of it?
You use the word resentment. Many
Yeah.
years ago, one of my coaches had said, he said, things happen to us, we go through a lot of pain, emotional turmoil, mental disturbance, everything. But he said resentment is one of those emotions which is like you drink the poison and wait for the other person to die. Yeah, and you keep drinking the poison
Yeah.
and you wait nothing and you see that nothing is happening to the other person. How come? Then you drink
Yeah.
it some more and then
Yeah.
you start feeling uneasy
Yeah.
and nothing is happening to the other person. He said, so we need to learn how to let go of the resentment part. We may be
Yeah.
angry, there is that hurt, of course, because we have gone through it. But resentment, so I really loved it. Since that day, I have been practicing it quite a lot. Sometimes successful, sometimes not so much.
Yeah.
But it has given me a lesson of that I'm drinking the poison, waiting for the other person to die. Not a very smart thing to do.
Yeah.
So from time to time, I also let go. But being human, sometimes it grips me. It really comes and
Yeah.
catches
Yeah.
you like how you catch the
Yeah.
fish. Fish thinks it's food and then it gets stuck.
Yeah.
The hook. So resentment and anger are those kind of hooks.
Yeah. The
Madhuri,
one
that
thing,
was very lovely.
yeah, that was what you said is so true. Just to add to what you said, Buddhism is, I find it giving a more direct example of how things can be and what you're doing. The metaphors are sometimes are very interesting. The Buddha apparently said, anger is like holding hot coals in your hand. It burns you, not the other person. I suppose it might burn the other person, but what he said is uh, clearly very true.
Yes, it is. And if you try this experiment, not just hot cold, if you hold ice in your hand, you can't hold it for a long time. Your hand will burn.
Yeah.
And it was surprising. I had never known that.
Yeah. Yeah, it does burn.
Yeah, you hold ice, you can't hold it.
That's true.
So whether it's cold or ice, both will burn.
Yeah,
One will, of course, be scalded. You will have all those marks. The ice may not, but it's burning.
absolutely.
So while I have been asking Madhuri questions, those of you who are listening to her, and if you have some questions about creative writing, how to write, the writing skills, please ask your questions of Madhuri now. You can unmute yourself and ask the question directly to Madhuri. Please go ahead because then we know that you are participating. Right? So we have Arun Paul, we have Eshita, we have Harika, Hemlata, Jyoti, Kayuri, Milani, then there's somebody who's on Moto G phone, there's somebody on Redmi phone, and there's Priya, there's Radhika, there's Sai Pradeep, Sangeeta, Srinivas. If you have any questions, please ask her. I hope you can hear me. Am I audible?
Hello.
Yes, yes, Sai Pradeep.
Uh, yeah, hello. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Ma'am, I had one question. I'm working as a, technical writer,
Yeah. Yeah.
not creative writing.
Mm.
Our process is like we develop something at first and then
Yeah.
it goes under scrutiny.
Yes.
So, what if like we get some inputs? So, the main this thing I face is sometimes to inculcate those inputs into my current work. So,
Yeah.
sometimes, lost that continuity.
Hmm.
That continuity.
Hmm.
It's kind of hard for me to to get it at once.
Yeah.
So for me it goes like 2 or 3 times and I just want to reduce it to one. Do you have any special tips or something for me?
How long have you been with this particular product?
This is a completely new field for me,
Hmm.
considering writing as a whole.
Hmm.
So I'm still learning per se.
Okay. Um, the one line
Thank you.
answer is you cannot, Sai, the one line answer is that you cannot reduce the iterations at this point in time. I'm a technical writer at an IT security company. I'm a non-technical person. So for the first, and this is the fifth year. So in the first 3 years, it took me iterations before I could write comfortably. Now the point is, even at the end of the person who's giving you the brief, there is a limitation in terms of the kind of information you will get from the person. So first of all, your job is to, over a period of time, improve your understanding of the domain, of competitors, and of the product itself and what it does. Essentially, the rules of writing apply here in the sense that what you haven't experienced, you cannot write with depth and understanding. So you do need to ask for a demo, and not just the developer giving you a demo, but you need to try out the product yourself and see how it works. If not in a real world scenario, at least a demo product in a sanitized environment and see how each field and everything works. So that is a requirement. The way I handled it in the first 3 years, and I continue to do that, is I go to them with a write up, because once they give the demo, I know how it is working. So I take a write up so that I can match them at least 50% in terms of the knowledge. And then the second part is, and here's where the constraint comes in terms of shortening the writing time for technical writing. Each kind of executive gives you a different set of knowledge about the product. My experience has been that developers give you the knowledge of how the product actually functions. If there's a product manager, and usually they are, and if they are separate from the developer, they have a big overview of the product and the situations in which it works and doesn't work. And then if you have support people, they can give you the customer angle of how the customer actually uses the product. The developers and product managers would intend the product to be used in a certain way, but the support people know how the customer actually uses it. None of us use it the way it's supposed to be used. These are the three factors, three different types of information that you get from different sets of people. It's necessary for you to recognize that you may not be able to get through to all three of them, and not every piece of writing requires that. But you do need to understand these gaps and be patient and take it in a layered approach. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. It does answer. I mean, it giving me a structure as to how to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Milani.
I have a small question. We have been seeing that with the influx of digital media and a lot of social media, the audience interest or the attention span is decreasing. So how does it affect the overall art of storytelling for the audience that we are pitching in today?
There's always been this talk about digital the distractions, and hence people's ability to go deep into an area is not the way it was earlier. The point is, there have always been, and if I take books as an example, there have always been a bulk of the population who didn't read books, but there's always been a hardcore population that has always read books and looked forward to laying their hand on the next book. My personal belief is that that audience still exists, and it is an expanding audience. It's just that we have a lot more avenues for getting information. For example, uh, we are better writers, better knowledgeable beings, because after the printing press, it's the internet that has given us access to information. And that's a new learning process. Now, the learning for us is not to replicate that ever present information in the deeper writing that we do. Essentially, the need for the deeper level of information and exploration of a subject still exists, which is why the publishing industry still exists, and which is why it is still a growing market. And given that the population is rising, you can see that that sphere is expanding in terms of pure numbers. But what we do have to consider is that now that information is available across board everywhere, what kind of information should I do that goes a level beyond this? For example, my daughter had a question when she was in college that whatever the teacher is coming and teaching is available in the textbook. It's also available on the internet in Spark Notes and Wikipedia and everywhere. So what's the point the teacher coming and telling us the same thing in the classroom? And that was a valid point. It is valid for writing too. If we are simply replicating something that is already there, it doesn't make sense. We will not find audience interest in the book. Those are the books that will not do well later. What you do need to believe in is that this audience is still there, that wants deeper writing. And you do have to go deeper into the subject and figure out those areas which have not been explored, find a new angle, find a real angle, and bring those into light. So that is how we need to look at the new reality. It's not a time when we worry that reading is going down or people are distracted, but to step up to the challenge of this change. It's a changing environment, and we need to step up our work in terms of meeting the challenge.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer, Miloni?
It does, it does. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so I have a question. Is reflection important in non-fiction?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to continue, it'll be a continuation of the answer I was giving to Miloni.
Yes.
Without the reflection or thinking through or exploring the different angles to a subject, we merely replicate certain facts that today are very visible, very available on the internet. Everybody with a phone has access to it. Earlier, at least, it was only the people with a laptop, but now everyone has a phone and you have access to that information. So without insightful thinking, insightful writing, which obviously comes from reflection, uh, one cannot sustain one's nonfiction. It does not have a chance to be sold as a book, probably as free material that people may read or may not read. And this is equally true for fiction. Now, in fiction, we believe it's a story. We believe that it's for entertainment. A lot of people take pride in saying that I don't read fiction any longer. But what they are really saying is, I don't read fiction because it's an area of entertainment, like probably some of the bestseller movies are. It's just that fiction is also entertaining as well as engaging what I'd call the intellectual process or reflecting or giving insights. So it's that engaging part that becomes very important. And in nonfiction, primarily most of us read nonfiction to engage our mind, our emotions, something in the psychology, and not just as an entertainment. So we do have to give a new angle or reinforce an existing angle. And without that element, you're competing with whatever Google throws up in the search engine. And that's a huge competition. And sometimes you just cannot, times like these, you just cannot compete with that level of competition. You have to, like I said, step up your act, go beyond that and go beyond those facts and present something more useful to the user.
I think that's where it connects to that earlier question, remember, about the empathy of the reader. That's what makes the connection more stronger.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, going deeper into the thing rather than the surface level facts is one angle, like I said.
Now, while writing, how does one develop the ability to write good prose? So when you're talking about writing some beautiful descriptions, realistic characters, some lovely musical sentences, which is required, I guess, in both the genres, whether it's fiction or non-fiction.
Yeah.
It's connected to the second question that you had answered, right? In the beginning.
Yeah. Malcolm Gladwell. Some don't
Yes.
agree with his methods of research and stuff, but I'm stuck on his 10,000 hours of work in a field for you to gain expertise in the field is what I believe in. I probably have done 3,000 or 4,000 hours so far. So to split that 10,000 hour generic remark into useful pointers for how to write good fiction or prose is this. We'll talk of fiction actually in this respect because that's got a very clear demarcation in terms of the elements that I want to talk about. What basically we see in fiction is the plot element, which is the skeleton. This is the hero, this is the heroine or the child. This is the struggle they face, and they face these challenges, they overcome them, and this is what happens in the end. That's a plot, just the skeleton. That's the first element. Now the second element is the characters and the situation that we put the characters in the plot. So this plot, if you take, someone said that there are just 6 basic plots in the whole world. So how come we have so many stories? That's because you're changing the characters and you're changing the situation in which you're putting the character in. You put them in, to use a very basic geographical situation, you put them in mountains, they respond in a certain way. You put them as people living in an island, they'll behave in a certain way, a classroom, a corporate world. So those are the dynamics which changes the elements of the story and how it is told. So that's the second element. And the third element is directly points to the question you're asking, the technique. The technique of how do you write good description? How do you write a good dialogue? How do you make it readable and interesting without being very basic, hi, hello, how are you, I'm doing fine. You don't, that is normal conversation, but it doesn't get into fiction. If you write like you normally converse, it's not going to be good dialogue. So those are the techniques of how you write fiction, whether it's description or dialogue. And it's a blend of all 3 elements that makes you a good writer. And given the complexity of just the number of elements that are there and the number of permutations and combinations that are possible, it does take some experience to get that far. There are, of course, people who have started writing in the first go and they've written a bestseller and they've written a whole book. But most of us, as we say, are mere mortals. So we do have to work at these things. So we work out mm, getting through a plot in a realistic manner with enough challenges thrown in, work through how do we make the character a rounded person. There's beautiful ways of just in one line or one paragraph, just giving a feel for the person. You're not telling exactly ki, this is the height, this is the hair color, this is that. No, but it's a matter of learning from the masters, from the workshops and textbooks and other writing of how you depict a character or a situation in a smoothest, nicest possible way in the shortest possible time. So these are things that you learn over a period of time. Essentially, you put in those hours that are necessary. You work every day, whether you have a job or not, whether you have housework and a job or not, whether you have housework, job, children, and aged parents or in-laws to take care of, you still take out that half hour or 1 hour that you can do and you finish it. To take some of our best-selling authors who opened up the Indian market sort of to fiction, Chetan Bhagat and uh, a few of those banking executives come writers, which came about in the last couple of decades. There are people who held down a full-time job, still went back home, and late in the night still wrote. So you need to write every day for you to master these techniques and get that flow.
Procter and Gamble CEO Gurcharan.
Gurcharan Das.
Gurcharan Das.
Yeah.
He's been a prolific writer too.
Yeah.
So, said
If he
others,
didn't have an
yeah.
excuse that I'm a busy person, I can't write a book, I'm sure we don't have an excuse.
A colleague of mine, Guru Charan Singh Gandhi, who's
Hmm.
continuing to work. I think he's right now the senior vice president, and he wrote a book called Kabir in Corporates.
Okay.
Sant Kabir, Sant
Hmm.
Kabir, how would Kabir be seen in corporate? So I was like, you found the time. Said, well, I wanted to write, so I had to find the time to do this.
Yeah.
So what you said is true, that 10,000 hours is, I totally believe in it.
Yeah.
That question basically came because when I was in school, I remember essay writing was always a nightmare, whether it was in English or Hindi or Marathi. I was studying in Bombay, so we had three languages. Came to writing essay, I used to sweat. See, question answer is easy. You just read and read and read, and by rote, it's done. How do you do essay?
So that's the creative part. So that is the broad definition of creativity. So fiction or non-fiction, there's a blank page in front of you, and you're supposed to come out with something that's reasonably original. And there's no pointer, there's no question at the top of the page that tells you answer this question and you've got your answer. You just have the vaguest hint. You probably have just one line, just somebody walking on the road probably, and something strike you, and all you have is that one line. You don't know the person, you don't know any name that comes to your mind that you want to put there, and you're supposed to start there and do a story, or just one insightful thought in nonfiction, and you're supposed to take it forward. You don't have an ending in mind like you have for answers to questions in essays that we write. And that is creativity. And the point is, I believe that all of us are capable of doing that. It's just that we need that ability to just plant ourselves in the chair and do that half an hour, 1 hour of writing. Just, it doesn't matter if it's scribbling in the beginning. uh, my experience in the divorce book had been that the first one page that I write in the morning or any time that I start is a waste. But I do have to get through that one page before the second page starts making sense. So that is what creativity is about. It doesn't have a pointer. You just have to trust something internally and just keep at it, even though you can see that it is shoddy, but just trusting the process that you will get there and you will.
That's so interesting. It's a beginning and start writing.
Yeah.
So, so we were talking about all these corporate bosses writing. Huh? Now, you see, for the last couple of years, lots of corporate bosses are writing books, lots of them. So, does that augur well for professional writers?
Completely. Of course, it does. I'll call on one person who's in the audience today, because that's a perfect example of a senior corporate executive, a consultant who's writing his book. Now, the point is, anytime there's a change, we can either view it as something that's come to crash our world, or we can see it as an opportunity to do better stuff ourselves, to learn from that change. And change is the time when you have this opportunity to do something completely different. I believe, just a tiny example, I believe the reason I got into the IEM was only because in the year that I took the CAT, they changed the format. Anybody who can adjust to that format, which just happened subconsciously, it's not something that I thought through, was what helped me, probably just a bit of luck. So you treat any change as a huge opportunity to do something different, to map yourself fast, learn from that, and move on. Now, if you look at corporate executives, they come with a huge amount of experience. They know the what of the business. One of my colleagues put it beautifully: corporate executives come out with the what, and their experience is a huge learning. What, as ghostwriters, we do is try to pick up that learning from them, use the techniques that we know of writing, fiction or non-fiction, and put it across. And the synergy between the two is beautiful. If we cleanly separate them, we say, okay, corporate executives are writing right now, so maybe there's less work for ghostwriters. That's a very defensive way of looking at things. And any such defensive way is pulls us back from being our better selves, pulls us back also from improving the type of work we do. But if we see it as an opportunity, there's a huge lot that we can learn about the what. Let's suppose there are 10 books, 20 books of corporates, beautiful ones that come out with the experience. There's so much to learn from that experience, and try to map it always when you're writing later. So anybody coming up with a change in the whole dynamic is a big opportunity to improve the entire uh, arena of, let's call them the corporate books in this instance. And there's a huge opportunity to give to the readers that bettered versions of writing, both from ghostwriters and from the corporate executives. You can learn from both and make a new baseline, a higher baseline for the readers, and everybody benefits from that. It goes deeper, it expands the market further, and you reach a more number of people. I'll just ask Srini Upaluri to answer this question because he is from,
Yes.
he
Since you
can
said
answer
we
from
have
the
a
corporate
writer
side.
among us, yes. Srini, would you please unmute?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. What do you want me to answer, Madhuri?
Yeah, so answer his question, Robin's question. There are a number of corporate authors now. So do ghostwriters suffer for lack of, reduction in the amount of work? Was that the question, Robin?
No, I said, does that augur well for professional writers?
So you augurs well for professional writers. Okay.
Yeah,
I think it's a
does it
partnership.
augur well? Yeah.
It's a partnership, to be honest, right? Like when I and Madhuri work together, it's a partnership. And for us, I think it's a new form of communicating what our perspectives are and how we want to see the world in some form. So I think, to me, I think working was to bring all the characters I met in my life and all the perspectives I want to set across. So had an idea of that. But how do you then weave it into how you make the reader come into the scene is where I think you work with somebody like Madhuri, who's absolutely professional writer in that. Like how do I make the person feel the room?
Yes.
How do I make the feel what is going through his mind at that point of time? And I think I think it's going to be much more partnerships to learn mutually. I don't think they are threat to each other. Actually, I think you get a lot more, as she said, much more engaging ways of how you put the readers together. And it's been a great experience of doing that. And I also like many people have called me back after reading some parts of it and said, "Hey, I can see myself there. Did I behave like that? Did I misbehave like that?" In some form, we brought that together, but take them back into a scene in a fictionalized way without, hurting, threatening. So it's very easy to threaten somebody, name somebody, rate it like a case study and say you were bad, versus you put it across saying that, this is possible way of doing things. And this is perhaps what has happened. So a lot of people started seeing themselves in those situations. So one of the things we are working together many times is about trying to take them back into situations they are familiar with, live through that, and then through that process can they learn a new way of doing things. So it's been a wonderful way of working together on something.
Thank you, Srinivas. So that brings me to another question. You talked about ghostwriting. So does ghostwriting fulfill you? And when you do the
Yeah, it
ghostwriting, do
does.
you share the credits?
Sharing credits is a smallish answer. It depends on the customer. So we'll come to that later. But whether ghostwriting fulfills you, see, the baseline is you have to see what fulfills you in life. Anything that is writing fulfills me. Yeah, I do want to do my own original piece of writing. I do want to do within that fiction. I do want to do creative nonfiction, which I was introduced to by by my niece, who's a science writer. The point is, writing fulfills me. Secondly, even if I'm ghostwriting, there's a certain amount of reflection, insight, thinking through the thing that goes into that. Despite the client will give you a brief, and essentially you are expanding that brief, or you are putting life into that brief. Let me put it that way. That reflection, insight, and expansion does fulfill me. The third part is, okay, with the ghostwriting, I'm not doing children's fiction, or I may not be doing my own piece of fiction, but of the three elements, that is just one element. And the reality is that, yes, I do have to do ghostwriting. I do have to do my technical writing to be able to sustain myself and do my the writing that I want to do. So seeing the things that you enjoy within the other things that, in quotes, life forces you to do. Either you look at it as, okay, life is forcing me to do this, I have to slog through it. That's one negative way of looking at it. Or you can look at it the positive way, always the silver lining. The silver lining is, with all these pieces of writing, I am writing, I am thinking, at the end of the day, I have to recognize that that fulfills me too. So yes, ghostwriting fulfills me, and it is giving me the opportunity to do my own writing. So I'm more grateful to it. About sharing the credits, yes, it depends entirely on the client, and it depends on the reasons for which they are they want the book written. Sometimes it's for branding the company, sometimes it's for the person's own branding. So their reasons differ for wanting to or not wanting to.
Yeah,
For
mother just
wanting,
put on there's a lot of
yeah.
disturbance. I request somebody, everyone else to please put themselves on mute, except for the person speaking. Everyone else, please put yourselves on mute. Thank you. Yes, mother, please go ahead.
Yeah, so the second part of the question of sharing credits, it
Yes.
depends on the purpose for which the client is asking you to write the book. So a lot of times it's for a personal branding, and it expands their domain for themselves, or they want to express themselves, but it does act in that zone of this is a piece of my strategy or marketing or branding for myself or my company, and hence I need it in my name. I fully respect that. So it depends on the client's purpose of having the book written. So sharing credit works from the client end, and at my end, it's perfectly fine. It may or may not work for all ghostwriters. It depends from case to case and writer to writer and client to client.
But don't you like to see your name on everything that you write?
Um,
And you talked about the client need, the client requirement.
yes, we all want that. In my 20s, 30s, definitely in my 20s and 30s, a little less in my 40s, I wanted to see my name on a book. I wanted to then see my name on a book that was a bestseller. And probably if it became a bestseller in India, I'd probably want my name to be seen as a bestseller across the world. And if I got one such book, I would want another and another. So there is a limit to what we can have in terms of those wishes, how many wishes we'll have
Right?
and how much we can have of that. So at this point in time, I'm looking more at, am I spending my day fruitfully? Am I spending my day in a way that fulfills me? And I am. So those outer things, it's nice if they are there. If it's not there, that's not the big deal. That's where I've come to.
Okay. All right. Anybody else wants to ask Madhuri the question that you've been wanting to ask? Please go ahead. Please unmute yourself and ask a question.
So you're in, yeah.
I feel like editing forms a huge part of creative writing, and it's easy to get attached to your own work, what you've written. How do you sort of step back, separate yourself from the work, and then edit it?
I probably haven't found an answer to that, Priya. It's just that an editor or a teacher an editor is kind of like a teacher in the sense you see the huge range of potential that everybody has and their unique ways of talking about things. So in that sense, you need to separate yourself and say, okay, this is this writer's reality, and I have to keep that reality in my mind and edit it. And at the same time, you have to have a clear demarcation of this is a reality, but this is not put across in the right way. So essentially, you have to separate that writer's reality from the technique and focus purely on the technique when you're editing for another person, which is a learning, which is a big learning. Does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Arunji, your phone is on mute.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. This was coming back to Melanie's question about the digital and the current environment impacting certain changes in the craft of writing. If we look back at books of the 18th, 19th century and now, there is a change in the craft of writing? In the sense they were more descriptive. I'm talking of fiction, of course. Do you see going forward, even the current period has thrown up certain newer ways, areas of writing, like, one sentence stories and things like that. Do you see in the near future the craft of writing changing?
The craft of writing, yes, will always evolve. It's easy to look at the past, the kind of descriptive novels we had from the past. And if we look at it today, they are completely different. That I would look at as not so much the attention span of the reader, but more as a change in the way writing is done. We are people who are never static. We live in a world that is never static. Things will always evolve. So in that sense, every 50, 100 years, we can see a visible difference, but the change is always happening. That is about the style of writing. But if you look at the size of books from the past to the present, they still remain around that 250, 300 page books. But we also have to remember when answering the question for the one-line stories, we have different moments in time when we read. There are times when we sit back and read. We want to go deep into the situation. When we read a novel, we create that situation around ourselves. It's going on subconsciously. That doesn't happen in a one-line thing. A one-line thing is like a summary that happens of a plot, and some of those are interesting. So it meets a certain requirement at a certain point in time. I do believe that this big requirement for immersing yourself in a story experience exists even today. And I would like to believe that it will exist even tomorrow, because it is through immersing ourselves in experiences, our own, the people next to us, in a story or another situation of a non-fiction book, that we learn and draw our experiences, not merely by acting out in a certain situation, but also from these. So the immersive experience that a full-length book or a full-length movie gives will always remain, is my perception. That is how I look at it.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Arun, for asking that question. Okay, anyone else? Okay, so I don't think anybody has any questions and nobody is asking one. Okay, Madhuri, so you said uh, that you wished to have your books be the top-selling book. Yeah. So here is something from my side. I pray and intend that your books become the top-selling books, not just in India but across the globe.
Thanks a lot, Robin.
That you write so well that people just fall in love with your books.
Yeah, it's just that we we have started to appreciate these big picture things. I really appreciate that, and there's no countering the fact, the validity it gives you for being a bestseller. But some of the greatest teachers, and I do have some great teachers in my family, some of the greatest teachers are teachers who teach a classroom, a child, 10 children, special interest in one or two children, and they deal with them just 30, 40 students at a time, or just one or two students at a time. You make the impact on one person, that's still very valid. It's just that it's not visible. So we need to make that differentiation between validity and visibility. But yes, thank you for your great wishes.
Why not have both validity and visibility? Make that happen.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So with that, we are coming to the close of our live chat with Madhuri today. Madhuri, in closing, thank you very much for taking your time out. You know, it's a working day, and almost more than an hour you took out, and everyone else who joined this live chat, thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. I will be putting up the recording on the Facebook and LinkedIn page, on my Facebook and LinkedIn page, and also on YouTube. So in case somebody wants to listen to it, or you want to share with somebody, you can direct them to go to YouTube or Facebook or the LinkedIn pages. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.